A bit of backstory before the video. I was 9 when this happened to me. My cousin Jesse was a year younger, and this event took place in July. The thing about living in the country is that it can be extremely boring. You are cut off from nearly all of your friends, and hiking in the woods begins to become boring after a while. And that was the predicament Jesse and I found ourselves in. My dad was at work, and Mom was out getting groceries. It was an incredibly hot day. When one of them got home, we were planning to head off to Vandewater to cool off. But the thing is, Dad doesn't get home until 6, and who knows when Mom will be back. My cousin Jesse then had the brilliant idea for us to bike down to the river, cool off, and then come back. At first I said no. If we were caught off the property, we would be in a world of trouble. We were allowed to play in the woods, but that was because it was close enough to the house. If we were called, we would surely hear them. However, after a while, I started to give in. It was hot out and we had nothing to do. Vanderwater is about a 20-minute bike ride, and if we stayed for an hour, we should be able to make it back before anyone else does. So we packed a few water bottles and made our way to the river. When we got there, we began biking towards one of the openings. If you are not from the area, I would describe Vandewater Park as a long trail, surrounded by smaller trails that veer off into sections. Jesse and I took one of those paths. To our relief, when we arrived, no one was there. We had the whole section to ourselves. Diving in felt amazing. At that moment, even if we did get caught, I didn't really care. I looked over to Jesse, and he seemed to share my sentiment. For the next half hour, we swam and barely said a word to each other. We each seemed to be in our own little world, enjoying our break from the scorching heat. However, our moment was then interrupted by a cold and emotionless voice. "Hello?" Startled, I looked over and saw a girl around our age, standing by the edge of the water. I immediately got an uneasy feeling. She was very thin, and as white as a ghost. She also neither looked directly at me or Jesse, almost as if she was repeating a line she has rehearsed many times before. Before I could speak, Jesse replied to her, "How's it going?" The girl then finally turned her head and looked directly at me. Remember how I said it sounded like she had rehearsed her first words? Well, what she said next didn't ease my suspicion. "Can you help me? I want to go home." There was no feeling behind her words and eyes. They were both just emotionless. I got really scared at that moment. "Sorry, we're leaving." "It's not far." "No, we have to go now." "Sorry." She didn't seem angry at all. She continued to have that emotionless look. After a moment of awkward silence, I decided we should get out of there. I told Jesse we were leaving. I think he was thinking the same thing because he didn't fight back or argue at all. We made our way to the bank. When I was close enough to her, I could see she had bruises on her arms and legs. Instead of looking at us, she continued to stare into the water. Jesse saw them as well, and like an idiot, he spoke up. "What happened to you?" Without looking at us, she replied again, in that rehearsed tone. "Kids roughhouse all the time. Sometimes these things happen." At the very least, she was my age. There was no way a kid would say something like that. I weaved past her and walked over to my bike. When I picked it up, she said something that terrified me. "You shouldn't leave now. Wait till we're gone." I had no clue how to respond. So I ignored what she said and got on my bike. Jesse followed me. We didn't say a word until we made it to the main trail. When we got there, he started to laugh. After a moment, I started to as well. After a few seconds of laughing, we both began to calm down. Instead of riding our bikes down the trail, we both just walked, making fun of that odd little girl. After 10 minutes of walking, the opening was in sight. When we got closer, I saw a man standing there. For some reason, I immediately thought of what that girl said to me. Jesse and I cautiously made our way to the opening. As we got closer, I saw more of him. He seemed to be in his 30s and very thin. When we were a few feet away, he donned an eerie smile.
Well, how y'all doing? You wouldn't have happened to see my daughter up there.
Before I could speak, Jesse spoke up. How old is she? The man then widened his smile.
She's around your age, I presume.
Yeah, she's in one of the trails.
Oh, I see. It's little Miss Sarah's birthday today, and she wanted to come swimming. The only thing is she ran away while I was grabbing our cooler. You wouldn't happen to mind showing me where she is. There's a nice Dr. Pepper in it for you.
No, we have to get going before we get in trouble. The man's smile went away for a brief moment, but then returned.
Oh. My van's big enough for those bikes. I'll be more than happy to give you a ride home.
He then walked towards us. I backed up, but had nowhere to go. He was blocking the exit, and if we turned around, I'm sure he would have grabbed us. I've never been more scared in my life. This had to be a dream, I thought to myself. As he got closer, Jesse spoke up in a loud voice, nearly screaming, "We have to leave." The man stopped in his tracks, then looked over to Jesse with a surprised and confused look. After what seemed like minutes, he finally spoke.
Sorry, I just wanted to find her before something happened. She isn't far up there, is she?
Jesse gave him basic directions to where she was. The man then began to walk up after her. It's been years since that day, and we both bring it up whenever we see each other. The reason why I'm writing this is because a few days ago I was at Walmart, waiting in line to get in. I'm sure standing in front of me was that man. Now that I'm full grown, I'm no longer scared of him. If it indeed was him. I have a theory to what happened that day. That man sent who he calls Little Miss Sarah into the park to look for kids who were alone. Her job was to lure them to that man. I think the reason why he let us go was because of the other vehicles. If we were alone, I don't know what would have happened. Little Miss Sarah, if you are still out there, I hope you got away. Or, at least I hope I was wrong, and your dad was just a very friendly person.